Preparing. Hi, Clive. Hi, Clive.
Hello, Rabbi.
Hi, sorry, I missed Mincha, and by the time I turned it on for you to get on, I saw that you wanted to come in. By the time I turned it on for you to get on, it was too late already.
Right. Okay.
Not
to worry.
Right. Okay, gentlemen, let's get started. We are live on Zoom. We are live on Facebook Live. We got Ivor here in person, so I get to speak to somebody in real life. We also have this share on anytime. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Anybody who'd like to get some great Torah content, head over to TorahAnytime.com for some really great Torah content. Okay, we start a new Sefer, the Sefer of Devarim. And within Devarim, there are many, many interesting ideas. And tonight I'm not going to give as long a share because I have a group that I'm speaking at tonight at 9 p.m. But I'd like to speak about one or two things. So let's start with the following. Devarim, these are the words that Moshe spoke to all the Jewish people. On the other side of the Jordan, Midbar in the desert, Barava, concerning the Arava, Mol Suf, opposite the Sea of Reeds. Between Paran and Tophel, Velavan, Achatzeres, and Dizav. Those are all different kinds of places. Rashi explains that each one of these places actually refers to a place where the Jewish people committed certain sins, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu is reminding the Jewish people of the sins that have committed, but he wasn't really reminding them properly. He was only hinting to them. There's a lot to be spoken about hinting to things, but we're not going to speak about that tonight. Rather, we're going to speak about, there's a following Rashi. Rashi says, Dima Moshe al Kol Yisrael. Who's al Kol Yisrael? Says Moshe Rabbeinu, Ilu hochiach miktsasa. On page 938 in the Art Scrolls. Ilu hochiach miktsasa, and if he had only told off part of them, then those people that didn't come to hear the drasha, the people that stayed outside would have said, you listen to what this Ben Amram, i.e. a very derogatory way of speaking about Moshe Rabbeinu. We don't call him Moshe Rabbeinu. We say, Amram's son, little kid or something. No, you heard Ben Amram. He didn't answer him. You know, you could have said X, Y, and Z. Ilu. If we'd been there, would we have said something? We wouldn't have let Moshe Rabbeinu talk to us like that. We'd have let Moshe Rabbeinu know exactly what we think. Therefore, lekach kinsam kulam, he brought them all together. V'amalem, he says, Harei kulchem kan, everybody's here. Kol misha yesh le teshuva yoshiv. If you have something to say, get up and say it. Okay? So this is a very interesting idea that he brings over here. And the Oznaim Torah expounds upon what was said here. So it says that Moshe Rabbeinu decided to say himself to everybody. He didn't want people to hear from everybody else. Whereas if you look in the rest of the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't speak to all the Jewish people in one go. It was impossible for Moshe Rabbeinu to teach all the mitzvahs in real time to all the Jews. So what happened was Moshe Rabbeinu taught a group of people. Those people then passed it on to someone else, who passed it on to Aaron. You know, he passed on to Aaron, and Aaron passed it on to the Zakanim, and they passed it on to other people. And there was sort of like a system, a trickle-down system. It was almost like a Ponzi scheme. It went from 1 to 2 to 2 to 4 to 4 to 8, and then people found out that way. Now is the way we let people know about the mitzvahs. Moshe Rabbeinu has never done this before, called an annual general meeting and made sure that if you wanted to be part of the Jewish people, you had to come. Now Moshe Rabbeinu says everyone needs to be here. Everyone without fail. And so Moshe Rabbeinu says to them, I'm telling you off now. And anybody that's got something to say, you have a problem? No problem. Tell me. You have an issue, you disagree, fine. Let me know about what it is that you disagree with, and I'll take up the point. But if you're not going to take up the point, there's no point in saying, oh, if I would have been there, I would have said something. So first of all, it says, there's not in the Torah that it wasn't exactly the way he did it by all the mitzvahs. But the question is, why can't we sort of send back the criticism afterwards? Why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to call everybody in? So you know what? If somebody hears it outside, he can send back the criticism to Moshe Rabbeinu. I don't know about you, but I know that many people are criticizing now what politicians said. They weren't there when the politicians spoke about it. They're still able to tweet about it. They're able to write articles about it. Just because you weren't there doesn't mean you don't have an opinion. So why is Moshe Rabbeinu so particular? Everybody has to be here, and if you want to say something, say something. To which the Oznaim LaTorah, Rav Zalman Sorotzkin says a very important idea. And that's the following. Have you ever read an article that somebody wrote about a speech, a rousing speech that somebody gave? It's just not the same. I mean, if I asked you, sit there and read I Had a Dream. One of the most famous speeches of the 20th century, right? I had a dream. I dreamt that, he's speaking about Martin Luther King Jr. He's speaking about all the dreams that he had about racial equality, how he's able to bring together the blacks and the whites and for everybody to live in harmony together. That was a dream. That was, if you stood at that speech, you stood there with 1 million people and you listen to Martin Luther King giving that speech, the tremendous eloquence that he had, the way he gave it over, you couldn't but be roused by that kind of a speech. Sit and read it on a piece of paper. I had a dream. I dreamt that, I had a dream. I dreamt that. It's probably quite punchy, but it doesn't pack the same punch as being there in person. When you're there in person, when you hear something in person, it's a very, very different story. And therefore, says the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu felt it was of utmost importance that people heard what he had to say, but came and heard it in person. Because if you hear something from somebody else, I remember many times I've heard somebody say something over from a friend or from a rabbi. I heard Rabbi so-and-so said X, Y, and Z. Really? That's what he said? That doesn't make sense. And then you look into it and you find out, well, actually, that's not really what he said. He said something slightly different. His intonation was slightly different. The point of stress was slightly different. And then suddenly when you hear that, you realize it's a very, very different story. About 5 years ago, there was a discussion I was having. It's probably 6 years by now. There was a discussion I was having with somebody within the shul, and they were quite upset about something that I had said or something that I wasn't willing to do. And we went back and forth for quite a while. And the problem was at the time, we went back and forth on email. And then at one point or another, the fellow got very, very upset with the email that I'd sent and sent a very strong email, and his wife sent a strong email, and things went a little bit pear-shaped after that. But the problem was at the time when I spoke to one of the people that was advising me, he said to me, he says, never deal with these kind of things over email. Because when I sit with you and I say, how you doing? And you say, fine. Or if I sit with you and say, how you doing? You say, fine. You said fine in both cases, but you didn't say exactly the same fine. One is not the same as the other. And that when I type it, and I say fine, it can come across very antagonistic. It can come across very friendly. It depends how you say it. And it depends how the other person on the other side is reading it. So they misread what I was saying, and then therefore they took what I was saying very, very badly, and it became a whole argument and a whole fight, which it didn't need to become. It was unnecessary. But that was because it was being conducted via email. When you conduct things via email, the emotions are missing. You cannot read into text the emotions of the person that's actually writing it. And how much more so is it when you're there when the person's actually speaking? You hear what he's saying. You hear his emotions. You hear his feelings. You hear his intonations. You can see his face. We spoke about it recently. That so much of communication, I think we said 70 or 80% of communication is nonverbal. It has to do with your stance. It has to do with the way you hold your hands. It has to do with your eyes. It has to do with your, a lot of the things. They don't have to do with the words that you can say. You can say to somebody, I'm your best friend, and the other person can feel really, really menaced by the fact, I'm your best friend. That's not a very friendly statement to make. And if I say it in a menacing way and I have a menacing stance, you realize that even though I said, I am your best friend, I didn't mean that because I said it very differently. So Moshe Rabbeinu says, you must come and hear this speech in person. You have to be there. You have to hear it. You have to know what I'm saying. And then if you're standing there, you're listening to what I'm saying, and you still feel that you want to say something. You still feel you want to pipe up and let me know that you feel differently, or that you feel that I haven't given you a fair hearing, or that I've not done things correctly, then please, by all means, say something. But you're going to hear somebody say over, hey, you know what? we were listening to the speech of Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu told us off. Oh yeah, what did that guy say? What did Ben Amram have to say? Oh, Ben Amram had to say X, Y, and Z. Really? And you let him get away with it? You didn't say anything? You didn't challenge him on it? We would have challenged him on that. That's rubbish. That makes no sense. This guy is leading you through the dark. This guy's having you on. And you, because you're some kind of lemela, because you're some kind of sheep, you just follow along like everybody else. That's why you said nothing. But had I been there, I would have said something. Moshe Rabbeinu says, look, everybody come. Only come, but listen to what I have to say. I'm going to be very, very clear about it. And if you're there, and if you hear what I have to say, and you still disagree, when you see my emotion, when you see my earnest approach, when you see the fact that I'm the leader of the Jewish people and everybody else is listening and willing to follow along, you still have a problem, by all means, come forward and say so. But to say it ex post facto, having heard it third hand from somebody else, of course you have something to say about it. You know why? Because you didn't hear it in person. You have to hear it in person to be able to really to feel what I feel, and then to respond anyway. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. And therefore, it's very interesting. Reb Zalman Sorotzkin writes afterwards, he says that, there are certain people in their lifetime were considered tremendous speakers. And yet they left writings behind, and the writings that they've left behind are nothing special. Nobody makes a fuss of them. Very few people read them. It's really not something that anybody takes any heed of or takes any notice of. And the question is, why is it that you have people that are so charismatic in their lifetime, and yet what they leave for posterity in their writings lacks anything? Nobody wants to read it. Nobody's interested. And he says the answer to that question is human emotion. You have to realize when you sit in a room and you listen to somebody giving over a speech and giving it over earnestly, versus when you read a book and you want to feel what the person says, you can't feel what the person's saying when you read a book in the same way as when you listen to him. I don't know about you, I've read certain books, they try to capture. You ever seen books that try to capture somebody's voice, or they try to capture the way he speaks? They give like 2 sentences and then they make ... and another 2 sentences and skip a line. Why? Next line. Why would a person do that? No, next line. You're trying to make it sound like you were there listening to the person speaking. Yeah, but my guess is that whoever writes these motivational books, I guess, what's his name? Tony Robinson? Yeah. Tony Robinson is probably 10 times as charismatic in person as he is reading his book. Can't compare. When he speaks, people are in their seats, they're jumping, they're fist pumping, they're doing all sorts of stuff. This guy really has people in the palm of his hand. I cannot imagine picking up a book and standing up in the middle of a book and going, yeah, fist pump, You just don't do that when you read a book, because the emotion's not there, the crowd's not there. He's just not got you riled up in the same way. It doesn't work. And therefore, it's important, if you really want to get a feel for Torah, the real way to get a feel for it is to hear it in person, not to read it. Reading is nice. Of course, if you learn it and you learn it out loud and you give it voice, that's great. So you sit and you learn in Chumash, Devarim, these are the words, you can give it life. And vice versa. By the way, oftentimes that one of the kinyonim of Torah, one of the ways of acquiring Torah is bishmir, when you hear it. That means either hearing other people talking about Torah or hearing yourself. Why do you have to hear yourself? Why can't I just read? Because it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to give you that enthusiasm. It's not going to push you in the same way as we go, these are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu spoke to. Can't compare that to reading it in your head. Yeah, there's a little voice inside your head that reads it. When we skim through it with our eyes, we hear it in our mind's eye. We listen to it because we're reading it to ourselves. But it's not the same thing. Even when you're talking to yourself, it's not the same thing. Talking to yourself or just reading something, it's a huge difference. If you're going to read it with all your feelings, you look into it and you read it and you connect with it and it becomes something. That's a big deal. So if you can hear Torah, try to hear it. Try to even be there watching the person if you can. Zoom's second best. It's better than listening to something on a recording because at least you can see someone's face. But if you can be there in person, that's the best way of doing things. Because when you're there in person, you feel the emotion of the moment. You're there to see the person. You're there to hear the person. You feel what the person's saying so much more than you could ever feel if you were just hearing it through someone else or through another medium. Books, speeches, whatever it is. Try to hear Torah firsthand. And when you hear things firsthand, that makes all the difference. Okay, so that's the first idea that I wanted to share with you. One more idea that I wanted to share with you. Very strange thing. Every year when I come up to this verse, I always find it a very strange verse. And today I saw a very interesting idea that was brought up by Rav Schwab on this verse. So we read over here the following. Moshe Rabbeinu is approached by all the Jewish people on page 944. In verse 22, Parak Aleph Pasuk Chav Beis. All of you came close to me. And you said, who sent people in front of us. They should spy out the land and then come back and give us an answer about the way that we're supposed to go and the cities that we should come upon them. What are the cities like? What are the ways like? What are the trees like? We're going to have a hard time. We're going to have an easy time, etc., etc. And they go and they see the land and they see the land is good and they come back and say, nevertheless, this is a land that we cannot capture, etc., etc. And then what happens is the following. Verse 34, turn the page to 946. Vaishma Hashem is called Direchem. Kosh Baruch Hu heard what you said. And he got angry and he made a shvur, he swore, saying, if one of the people and these people sees this terrible generation, the beautiful land, the good land, which I promised to give to your forefathers. Except for Caleb and Yefunah, Caleb and Yefunah will see it, and I will give to him the land that he stepped on and to his children, because he did what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted him to do. Next sentence. HaKadosh Baruch Hu got upset with me as well because of you. You will not come there. Rather, Yoshua ben Nun who stands in front of you, he will come there. Also, Chazek, you need to strengthen him because he's going to be the one that is going to be able to give the land as an inheritance to the Jewish people. And the question is obvious. It would seem from these verses that the reason that Moshe Rabbeinu was not let into the land of Israel was because of the story of the spies. We're in the middle of the story of the spies, right? God says, hey, you complained? You don't want to go to Israel? Fine. You won't go to Israel. Your kids will go to Israel. Other than Caleb and Yefunah, none of you are going to go to Israel. And the only one going to bring you in is Joshua. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says, and God was angry with me as well at the time. And he says to me also, I won't go to the land of Israel. That's got nothing to do with the spies. That's got nothing to do with this whole story. Where exactly does this verse make sense or fit into the structure of this thing that we're speaking about? It just doesn't seem to fit. Yeah? So that's the question that many of the Mefarshim ask. How come Moshe Rabbeinu is blaming the Jewish people with the story of the spies for him not making it into the land of Israel? It's got nothing to do with it. Says Rav Schwab. Such a beautiful idea, such an amazing insight. He says the following. He says, listen, Moshe Rabbeinu kept on hearing the same thing from the Jewish people. You know what Moshe Rabbeinu heard from the Jewish people again and again and again? You're no good. Let's go back to Egypt. Why did you take us out of Egypt? Why are we stuck in this desert? You don't take care of us. All these things is what Moshe Rabbeinu hears from the Jewish people, but constantly, not as a one-off. Again and again and again, Moshe Rabbeinu is being told, no good. We don't want to be here. This is no good. This is literally what Moshe Rabbeinu hears again and again and again. And therefore, says Rav Schwab, when you hear that often enough, it starts to rub off on you. You start to believe the other people's propaganda. You start to believe, you know what, we don't belong in the land of Israel. Or maybe I'm not good enough. Or maybe I shouldn't have been the head of the Jewish people. Or maybe we should have just stayed in Egypt. Or maybe we're never going to make it into the land of Israel because this is just some kind of journey into the nowhere. No, he doesn't seem to refute what they're saying. Now, obviously, he's trying to pray to God but very rarely do we see Moshe Rabbeinu saying like, that's just not true. Again, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't believe it. But the question is, and this is what Rav Shwam is saying, did Moshe Rabbeinu subconsciously somehow get into his head and believe what they were saying? Did that become part of the way he functioned? Because if it did, that would be a real issue. If it did, it'd be a real problem. And therefore, he says, Rav Shwab, yes, Moshe Rabbeinu heard that speech from the Jewish people too many times. And because he heard that speech from the Jewish people too many times, subconsciously, it affected him. And once it affected him subconsciously, when it came to the story of the Mei Meriva, when it came to the story of the water by the rock, he did the wrong thing. Not because he normally would do the wrong thing. Normally he did the right thing. But they had worn him down. Subconsciously, subliminally, this became part of who he was. And therefore, when it came to him, Shimona Amorim, what you rebellious ones, you speak constantly against God, he felt very, very aggrieved because he'd heard the same thing again and again and again. It became part of his psyche, became of who he was. And once it became part of who he was problematic. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying. Gambis anaf Hashem, God got angry at me as well, biglalchem lemar, because of you. Because you kept on saying I was no good. And because of that started by this story of the Meraglim, and it continued throughout the desert. Again and again and again, they keep on saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, you're no good, let's go to Egypt. You're no good, you're not going to be able to lead us. You're not going to take us into the land of Egypt, of Israel. You're not going to take us to the land of Israel. We're not going to make it the land of Israel. And at one point or another, Moshe Rabbeinu basically folded. And he's like, yeah, I guess I won't take you to the land of Israel. And he did something that caused him not to take them to the land of Israel. And it's so important to realize the power of our subliminal messages and the power of constant speaking to people. I've seen it a few times. You know, you have certain people. Have you ever seen, for example, okay, again, I mean this in the nicest way, but have you ever seen a woman who has been emotionally abused by her husband? Okay, terrible thing. But sometimes I've seen women who've been emotionally, or I've seen men also the same way around, who've been emotionally abused by their wives. And they turn into like little weaklings. You see this guy in the base medrash and he talks, he's got a big talk. He's like, he says, I'm going to do this and I'm going to go home. I'm going to tell my wife this. He comes home and he says, I think, what do you have to say? Nothing, I won't say anything. Why? Because she's worn him down, or he's worn her down. People start to believe you're a nothing, you're a nobody, you always get things wrong. And sometimes in these instances, we end up with self-fulfilling prophecies. The more a guy or a woman hears they're no good, after a while, they start to internalize that message. You are no good. You take a child and you put that child through bullying. That's the terrible thing that bullying does. Bullying often allows the child to believe he's no good or she's no good. They're not worthy because they start to believe the bully and the rubbish that the bully's trying to tell them. We think, people always said, that when we were kids, they always said, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. What a lie. What a lie. That's said with a lot of bravado. Now, usually, kids used to say that one, especially when you were kids that had got bullied. And they used to say it like in a very quavering, shaking voice, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. Oh, yeah, sure. You seem very convinced by that yourself. It's just not true. It's not true. Words can hurt. Words can break people. Words can build people. Words are extremely powerful. And when used correctly, the words that you give, the encouragement you give a spouse, you give a coworker, you give a rabbi, you give a student, you give a friend, builds them and allows them to continue with their good work and continue with their good life that they do. And vice versa, when people get worn down again and again and again, at one point, either they start to believe what's being told to them, or they get jaded and they start to not care. And then no matter what complaint comes, oh, they're all just complainers. They all constantly moan. They don't appreciate me. And so we have to realize, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying over here, God got upset with me because of you. You wore me down. You kept on saying bad things about me. You kept on putting me down. And that is why I ended up in the situation I ended up in. Not because I chose that situation. You pushed me into it. You made me do it. You made me believe. You shouldn't have. I wish you wouldn't have. And it means we need to understand the power of our words. We need to understand that our words can build and our words can break. And hopefully we will use our words to build as opposed to using our words to break. Okay, so that's the ideas that I wanted to share with you tonight. Again, as I said, slightly shorter. Apologies for the fact that it's shorter. Thank you so much for all of you who joined us on Facebook Live. Thank you for those who joined us in person. Thank you, Ivor. For those who joined on Zoom and for everybody on Try Any Time. Next week, there's not going to be a show. I'm going to be on holiday and the week after as well. Look forward to seeing you in 3 weeks' time. Hashem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you.
Rabbi.